This is the story of a happily married couple, Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu, who together ruled Romania for nearly a quarter of a century. Romanians sarcastically called this socialism in one family. The concentration of power in their hands and the cult of personality which surrounded them was quite different from the other communist countries in Europe. Even the private lives of Romanians were targeted by the Ceausescus. Both contraception and abortion were banned. Any signs of rebellion or defiance were ruthlessly silenced. When communism collapsed, the Ceausescus were the only leaders to meet the fate of tyrants. Down one of the walkways in Bucharest's main cemetery is the modest resting place of the man who relentlessly molded the lives of a whole generation. In view of the hatred he inspired, it is perhaps surprising that his grave is well maintained, and that Ceausescu even inspires some respect 20 years later, for a few at least.
I come to Ceausescu's grave every Saturday because thanks to him, I have a house, I had a job, I didn't lack anything. It was inconceivable that I shouldn't have food on the table. Although I raised 2 children on my own, they had all they needed.
Ceausescu's popularity began here on the balcony of what was then the Communist Party headquarters. A few years after he came to power, Ceausescu had the courage to criticize the Soviet Union and the other satellite states for invading Czechoslovakia. Never before had a satellite leader criticized the Soviets so publicly.
Dragi tovarăși, cetățeni ai țării românești, pătrunderea trupelor celor 5 țări socialiste în Ceoslovacia constituie o mare greșeală și o primejdie gravă pentru pacea în Europa, pentru soarta socialismului în lume.
By proclaiming Romania's independence from Soviet domination, Ceausescu aroused Romanian nationalism. Nicolae Melinescu was in the crowd.
It was a very emotional speech, and at that time, if Ceausescu came down into the street, he would have been regarded as a national hero, and I think people would have kissed him.
Ceausescu's popularity was to decline, but his power did not. Indeed, it grew, and was sustained by a cult of personality which had both narcissistic and monarchic overtones. As head of state, head of the armed forces, and head of the Communist Party, Ceausescu exercised incredible power. But it was a power he shared with his wife. It was a power which was used to interfere in any aspect of a citizen's life. And that even included intruding into the home life of a senior party man like Joe Pop. He and his wife Nadia were privileged enough to have their own movie camera and projector. The Pops already had the camera when their first child was born.
Her name is Indira.
We'd just come from the maternity ward.
These are her first days after we brought her home.
She was so pretty. Her eyes were so blue and a little red mouth. Here she was less than 2 weeks old.
As a party member, Joe should not have married Nadia at all. He was a communist and the son of a peasant. She was from the former ruling elite, and therefore a class enemy who had lost all privileges. From Nadia's point of view, marriage to Joe was a lifeline.
Because in those days, members of the Communist Party were the only people with a good future. They were among the few who could have a career, live a better life, and avoid doing manual work.
Joe and Nadia married secretly. There are no wedding pictures.
Din această cauză, după ce m-am însurat și am anunțat...
That's why after I got married and told them who I'd married, I had problems.
V-am povestit că am fost chemat la Comitetul Central de un secretar al Comitetului.
I was called to the Central Committee by a senior party figure who insulted me.
M-a insultat.
She asked me how I dared to marry without asking for their approval.
Să mă căsătoresc fără să le cer lor consimțământul.
Communists were atheists, so Joe should not have had his daughter baptized.
If they'd found out at work that we baptized our girl, they'd have fired my husband.
Their daughter was baptized secretly, and the celebration which followed was held away from prying eyes.
Este sărbătorirea botezului.
We celebrated at home because I had a high-ranking position in the party.
Eu având o muncă de răspundere pe acea vreme.
We couldn't celebrate publicly, for example in a restaurant or a church.
Nici la restaurant, nici la biserică, nici nicăieri.
Ceausescu celebrates the birth of the 20 millionth Romanian. He was obsessed with increasing the population to provide manpower for his new industries. So in 1966, he banned abortion for all women except for those who already had 4 children. Any mother caught having an abortion was jailed, as was the abortionist. These were serious penalties, as crucially, contraception was banned as well. One way to stop abortion was regularly to check all females of childbearing age to see if they were pregnant. This was done in some high schools. A very unworldly Daniela Dragic remembers the first time a gynecologist examined her.
We didn't really know what he wanted from us, but there were rumors going on, and we knew he was looking at a certain part of our body that no one had ever looked at before. We were scared. We were afraid of what they might say, they might write down after that kind of examination, of what they might tell our parents. We didn't even know how you got pregnant at that time. Maybe we had kissed, and maybe you could get pregnant like that. There were rumors that if you kissed, you could get pregnant.
But once she learned the facts of life, Daniela quickly learned what a nightmare the ban on abortion and contraception was.
You couldn't have fun having sex while you were afraid. Everybody was afraid, particularly the girls. The boys maybe didn't care that much. They were not the ones who would have to get an abortion, so they didn't really feel what we felt. The girls really were scared, and they were not confident at all, even when having sex, and withdrawal was the method, because we couldn't control it.
For most families, and particularly for poor couples like the Niagus who already had 3 children, Ceausescu's law was terrible.
He wanted people to have as many children as possible, to torment them because people had no means to raise them. There wasn't enough food, housing was scarce, and people lived 3 or 4 in one room.
Ceausescu later ruled that women working in factories should be inspected every month to see if they were pregnant, thus making abortions virtually impossible. Paraskiva remembers the inspections.
I was ashamed, but what could I do? I was ordered to get undressed. The nurses were rude, and the doctor would shout too if he didn't like how I lay on the table, if it was difficult for him to examine me. The doctors were patronizing and put me down. They called me stupid. They told me I behaved as if I'd been born in a barn.
Townswomen who wanted abortions often used peasant women, and peasant women who wanted abortions often did their own. Anuta Timish carried out 3 such abortions.
I used a medical instrument like an aerial made of stainless steel. Well, I put a serum for injections and a little bit of medical alcohol into the instrument, and I put it in my uterus. That was all. It took about a week, and during that week all the fluid bled out. There was some pain, of course, but it came out.
And what did you do with it?
I buried it. What else could I do? I buried the fetuses by the electricity pole in my backyard. Nobody could look there. Nobody knew about it. Who was to know?
Anuta says all the women in her village did their own abortions. Back in Bucharest, Nadia Pop didn't want any more children. When she got pregnant again, she thought of doing an abortion on herself when doctors refused to do one for her.
I considered doing it on myself, but then I thought, am I insane? I could be sent to prison, I could die. When I had my earlier abortions, it never occurred to me that I might die. But once I had my girl, I couldn't take that risk because I had to live for her.
It's estimated that over 10,000 women died from botched abortions during the Ceausescu period. Anuta Timish was eventually jailed for helping a neighbour with her abortion. Whilst in prison, Anuta gave birth to a child which she desperately wanted to keep.
3 weeks after I had my baby girl, they told me that they'd send me to a women's labour camp. I said, let me see my baby for the last time. And very reluctantly, some policemen made that possible. So I went to see her. I kissed her, and then I left. I never saw her again.
As an illegal abortionist, Anuta would have been deemed unsuitable to be a mother. The Ceausescu family had come a long way from their beginnings in illiterate, dirt-poor, often drunken peasant homes. 27 family members came to hold top positions in party and government. But the head of the family, for all his drive and ruthlessness, had his fair share of hang-ups. One of his closest collaborators was Stefan Andrei.
He was painfully aware that he was short, that he stuttered, that he was ugly. He didn't have any friends, and generally he was always on his guard. His wife played a completely destructive role. She was a mean, backward, shrewd woman who dominated him.
Quite apart from her unique access, Elena acquired real power when she took control of all political appointments within the party.
When someone was due to be named as minister, she'd say, "I don't agree," and her opinion was final. There were many instances when I talked to him, and he would tell me, make sure nobody knows, meaning she wasn't to know.
Elena also used to interfere in cultural matters. One target was Stefan Andrei's wife, film star Violeta Andrei.
I just don't understand why she hated me so much. She never even spoke to me.
Elena was apparently jealous of beautiful women. There's also the suggestion that both Ceausescus were prudish.
Before 1972, I appeared in many, many films, both on the small and on the big screen. In these movies, I would show my legs. I would wear low-cut tops. I was shown in the bath, covered in bubbles, in a movie called Felix and Ottilia. This was disturbing for the Ceausescus.
Directors had got wind of Elena's dislike of Violeta's style.
For example, I was starring in a musical and I was wearing a very revealing bikini. The director asked the costume designer to throw a chiffon top over my swimsuit so it didn't look so revealing. He asked why I wasn't wearing a one-piece swimsuit. I replied that I had never worn one.
Soon after, Violeta was banned from TV and film. Elena and Nicolae Ceausescu were to get some useful lessons on manipulating their own image.
Ceausescu was inspired by the cult of personality, which was a key feature of Kim Il-sung's regime in North Korea. When I visited North Korea myself, I realized how much Ceausescu had been impressed by Kim Il-sung and the way he ran things. They were very good friends, too.
De altfel erau și foarte buni amici.
The Romanian cult of personality portrayed the peasant son alongside the great kings and heroes of the nation's history. His wife was Queen of Romanian science. Not a bad title for someone who had left school at 14 after failing nearly every subject. The popular displays of adoration knew no limit.
Elena Ceausescu, mândre flori vă dorim din razele iubirii, dar științei și al împlinirii ne îndrumați să fim cutezători. Iubiți părinți!
Attending these displays was compulsory. 250,000 would take part in the annual Independence Day parade.
One bad thing, you had to wake up very early to walk long distances to get to the gathering point and then march on in front of the leadership of the country. So that was quite unpleasant. On the other hand, it was a sort of a get-together. That was a good part because you met your friends and then get into a park or anywhere else where they had cheap beer, sausages, sandwiches for half a price that they were usually sold for in any other day. It was a sort of a popular festival. It was a huge picnic.
But when Nicolae Melinescu, seen here in the studio, joined Romanian TV News, he discovered that dealing with footage of their leader was no picnic. certain images were simply banned.
And that meant, let's say, all natural things, gestures that common people do, like blinking, or like stuttering, or wiping your forehead when it was too hot. He had to speak hours and hours on end. He hated air conditioning, and he was sweating.
Sometimes cameramen could not avoid getting unsuitable shots. So these pictures of Ceausescu relaxing with party cronies were really not quite right.
He was never shown chewing food or drinking from a glass or a cup of water. Never. Just half the gesture, no? Taking the cup or the glass to his lips.
On one occasion, Melinescu slipped up. We don't have the pictures, but he certainly has the memories.
And the incriminated picture showed everything which shouldn't be shown under no circumstances. Ceausescu, in 2 seconds only, did everything wrong. He stuttered, he blinked, he wiped his nose, he forced his eyes, he was nervous. Something happened during those 2 seconds, and that came onto the screen. And that was disaster. I took the blame, and for about 6 months there was a cut in the salary, and I was put to do the menial jobs of the department.
A tiny minority sought to criticize the leader. One Romanian cartoonist had the courage to lampoon Ceausescu's practice of having streets cleared of traffic so his motorcade would have a clear run.
The tram is in the middle of the road and the policeman's saying, "Pull over to the right and don't answer back. The comrades' convoy is coming."
Mihai Stănescu was even able to show this cartoon publicly. He was the only critical cartoonist allowed to exhibit his work from time to time. One occasion particularly sticks in his mind.
Many were queuing to see my work and didn't dare to laugh. They'd wait until they got outside because they were afraid someone would snitch on them that they had laughed at Stănescu's cartoons.
Stănescu had fought long and hard to be allowed to show his work. But there have been suggestions that it suited the secret police, the Securitate, to tolerate him.
It was a way of controlling people. I'm not saying that Mihai Stănescu was controlling us. Thank God for him and his cartoons. But I think the system also had a way of controlling us through jokes and allowing certain things so we wouldn't just blow up.
Securitate tolerance did not go as far as allowing 2 books of his cartoons to reach the shops. Yet interestingly, some of the Securitate officers kept copies for themselves. Their office was close by. From their windows they could watch him in his studio.
Once they came to my studio and asked me to autograph one of my censored books.
In the 1960s, a band in the town of Timișoara had made a name for itself by playing British pop music, especially the latest Beatles numbers.
Baby at your breast, wonder how you managed to feed the rest.
The leader of the Phoenix band, Nicu Kovac, was a natural member of the Awkward Squad. Typically, he filmed his band traveling upstream, literally. Here was his response to Ceausescu's announcement that all Romanian art may only draw on authentic national folklore.
From now on, we were only allowed to sing in Romanian. Our response was, "You want folklore? You'll have folklore."
However, the folklore was combined with rock, and the songs had a strong Robin Hood theme.
We were angry young men, and rock music was our way of expressing our feelings. But as we sang in archaic Romanian, they couldn't compare us with Western bands and accuse us of importing foreign influence.
Normally, the police would confiscate the ID of any teenager with long hair and only return it when he got his hair cut. But Nicu found a way round this.
To this day, I can't understand how I acquired such a privileged status. When my band members had their IDs confiscated, I used to intervene. I'd go to the police station and have a row with the cops. The result was always the same. They'd hand over the IDs, and our guys' hair stayed long.
Kovac seemed to enjoy some sort of protection from higher up, but it didn't last.
To make sure there was no fighting and that people wouldn't shout forbidden slogans, the Securitate soldiers and police mingled with the audience. There were policemen with dogs outside the stadium as well. All this intimidated the audience and ensured that they showed their appreciation only by applauding.
Soon the Securitate were threatening Kovac.
I was warned, you're in great danger, because it was so easy to end up in a madhouse tied to a bed, with them saying he was taking drugs.
Kovac took the hint. At great risk, he hid his band in loudspeaker boxes and smuggled them out of Romania. Vasily Paraschiv, a working-class man from the town of Ploiești, was one of the very few who challenged Ceausescu openly. Nothing could stop him. In 1971, he sent a list of proposals to the party leadership and to the unions, of which he was a member.
Those 11 proposals stipulated precisely the democratic rights and freedoms that are enjoyed today by the Romanian trade unions.
The response of the Securitate was a series of beatings in secluded places, like this forest near his home.
They beat me. They tortured me. They hit my soles with a rubber stick. They hit my face and my stomach with their fists. And they hit me on the head with bags filled with sand. For 7 days and 7 nights, without water and food.
This didn't stop Paraschiv fighting for union rights. After being attacked again, this time on the staircase outside his flat, he got himself photographed immediately afterwards. But the worst thing that happened to him was being put in psychiatric hospitals 3 times, even though he was perfectly sane.
Ceausescu had declared that only a madman could disagree with the grand achievements of socialism. And if there were people who disagreed, then they were mad. And the straitjacket was awaiting them.
Paraschiv is one of the few victims of the regime who ever got to confront some of his tormentors. After the revolution, he went back to one of the hospitals where he'd been detained. There he met the hospital's former chief psychiatrist, Dr. Ara Kerestigyan.
Bună ziua, domnule doctor.
Bună ziua.
Să trăiți. Mai mă cunoașteți?
Da.
Luați loc, vă rog. Ce mai faceți?
Dr. Karastigian insisted that Paraschiv was mentally ill, but admitted that the hospital had been used by the regime to isolate troublemakers.
Securitatea a dus uneori bolnavi în anumite împrejurări, evenimente, bolnavi care s-au internat la noi.
Mi s-a părut lucru normal asta?
Bolnavi care conturbau liniștea sau ordinea sau deranjau într-un fel sistemul, aduceau, dar care erau bolnavi, nu oameni, care nu oameni sănătoși. Oameni sănătoși nu.
Paraschiv's original admission file stated that he suffered from paranoia. The symptoms included publicizing a series of irresponsible complaints against the authorities, at home and abroad. Paraschiv says his dignity was destroyed in the hospitals.
I would rather have been tried in court and sentenced to years in prison than have my dignity destroyed. Of course, that was the intention of the Securitate. They wanted to convince my workmates that I was not sane and that they should ignore ideas about free trade unions and democratic rights.
If anyone was suffering from paranoia, it was Ceausescu. Not just about opposition at home, but also about traveling abroad, as his foreign minister, Stefan Andrei, recalls.
As a rule, he didn't eat at official dinners on foreign trips. He had his meals at the embassy, prepared by his own cook. He was accompanied by a chemist who was in charge, among other things, of destroying his excrement so that nobody could examine it to check the state of his health.
Colonel Dmitry Berlan at the Securitate was Ceausescu's chief bodyguard.
În vizitele respective, dădea mâna cu cineva.
If during a visit he'd shake hands with a foreigner, particularly if he was from the Third World, there was always in his entourage either an officer or somebody from the Food Safety Agency who had a medical kit containing tissues dipped in alcohol.
O trusă medicală, exista șervețele îmbibate.
And he'd be given one of them to wipe his hands.
Și se ștergea pe ele.
Ceausescu's suspicion of foreigners meant that the Securitate had to take a close look at anyone who traveled abroad. As senior party member Joe Pop discovered after he returned from an official trip to New York.
În aprilie 65, când am venit în țară,
when we returned to Romania, the Securitate suspected that we'd been recruited as American spies. Even though I was a director working for the Department of International Relations, I was suspended and forbidden to go abroad.
But Joe was cleared, his career prospered, and he and Nadia were able to enjoy the slight increase in living standards of the late 60s and early 70s.
We'd bought a Yugoslav car, a Sastava. Look.
Here is our little girl again, and our glorious Sastava.
It was good.
Now the Pops could easily get to Nadia's parents in the town of Târgoviște and escape from the ever-present surveillance in Bucharest.
Family was where we felt safe. A place one could take refuge in without fear of being listened to or sneaked on.
Neighbours were nosy sometimes.
But Joe was even watched at his in-laws. It turned out that the local Securitate boss knew his mother-in-law.
He told her, if you're under the impression that we don't know what your son-in-law does while he's in Târgoviște, think again. Lucky for him, he's okay. We can't hold anything against him, but we know everything. So they kept me under surveillance all the time.
Well, actually, the Pops did find some escape from being watched at the seaside.
It wasn't crowded.
It's one of the most beautiful places that I've ever been to. We had so much freedom for the children. It wasn't luxury as in other places, but it was very pleasant.
Perhaps the most unexpected targets of the Securitate were the Ceausescu children, all the more so when we consider who authorized the surveillance.
Au fost în mare măsură puși de mama mea să ne supravegheze pe noi toți copiii.
My mother asked the Securitate to keep an eye on us.
Dragoste se poate spune oricum exagerat.
This might have been from a misguided sense of love, but whatever it was excessive. The Securitate couldn't touch us, but the information they gave our mother created a lot of problems for us.
Am avut destule neînțelegeri.
La un moment dat primesc telefon prin stație să mă întrebe unde se găsește.
One day I received a call asking where's Zoya Ceausescu.
Atunci am primit telefonul de la dispecerat.
I reported and then got another call saying that I was to go and fetch Comrade Elena.
Dumnezeu a venit, s-a urcat în mașină și am...
I went to the residence. She got into the car and we went to the Harestro Park in order for her to see what Zoya was doing in the park with her boyfriend.
Cu Petre Roman, cu Petrica. A văzut.
She saw from the car that they were walking, holding hands, or the boyfriend would have his arm around her waist or around her shoulders.
De mijloc sau de după.
We stayed for about 15 minutes.
Am stat circa vreo 10-15 minute.
Elena was to force Zoya to end two of her relationships. The Securitate kept close tabs on son Nicu as well. Elena and Nicolae did not approve of the hedonistic lifestyle Nicu enjoyed with his sweetheart, Donca Mizil. In their determination to stop them marrying, Nicolae even broke his own law.
He ended Nicu's long relationship with Donca Mizil. He went so far as to force her to have an abortion. He took the child out of her without her parents' approval and without her approval. It was illegal, of course.
Nicolae and Elena wanted Nicu to go into politics and lined up a budding youth leader for him, Poliana Cristescu. Nicu married her very reluctantly.
După ce a semnat Nicu certificatul de căsătorie,
after he signed the marriage certificate, Nicu said to Poliana, "Now go and live with my mother."
Ce acum stai cu mama.
She should shag you because she chose you.
Că ea te-a ales.
Few ordinary people could escape the endless surveillance and interference. But Daniela Dragic did manage to create something like an alternative life. After she and her husband were sacked for refusing to translate some government propaganda, she set up a kindergarten.
I had this private English teaching kindergarten in my own apartment. I could make a living. I could do what I wanted. I spoke English with the kids. I lived in a different world. I created a world that was different.
Daniela even organized a birthday party for one of the kindergarten children in the spacious house of a foreign diplomat. She was breaking all the rules. For Romanians, contact with foreign embassy staff or going to their homes was strictly forbidden.
Most people, let's say, survived communism by listening to Radio Free Europe, by having an underground abortion provision network, We would sit together in the kitchen most often, drinking beer, eating sunflower seeds, and talking against the government. And that helped us, you know, exercise, maybe in a way, ourselves, and survive communism and even laugh about it.
De cristal, Hârlău, 1984.
The dreadfulness of everyday life provided rich material for one student comedy group. They filmed this spoof New Year's broadcast by Romanian TV for their private amusement. But before any public performances, all their sketches had to be approved by the censors.
It reached the height of stupidity when the Ministry of Culture and Communist Education, I hope my memory's not betraying me and this was the actual name, had issued a list of forbidden words. These words weren't allowed on stage, in shows, on TV, in newspapers, anywhere else.
Yes, newspapers too.
So these words were forbidden.
One forbidden word was dollar. The censors assumed that anyone who used the word must be an enemy of the working class.
One of the jokes was that as we couldn't say the word dollar, we claimed we had bought a piece of machinery with rubles. The censors were outraged by this as well and wrote on our script, any other currency. And we said exactly that. We bought this piece of machinery for 300, any other currency. The audience burst into hysterical laughter. It was funnier than any other word we could have used.
Because the student audience cottoned onto the fact that we'd been censored. The censor, a really nice guy, didn't want to impose on us the alternative to the word dollar. So he allowed us to choose any other currency, as long as it wasn't the dollar. But we took it literally and said it cost 300 any other currency. People roared with laughter.
After 20 years in power, Ceausescu started planning his legacy. So in 1985, he and Elena signed a document proclaiming their decision to adorn Bucharest with a new government centre. The document was buried in the foundations. The project meant knocking down a quarter of the old city. "40,000 homes were demolished. There was no consultation and no appeal. These pictures were secretly taken by someone living on the edge of the destruction zone. Centerpiece of Ceausescu's new Bucharest was to be a palace of the people, second only in size to the Pentagon.
Ceausescu inspected his building sites every Saturday morning. Preparing for these visits was quite exhausting. He had enormous vitality. No detail was too insignificant. He required a precise explanation about everything we did. He was very abrupt.
For the construction workers, this was exhausting and dangerous. One worker had to disguise his identity when he spoke to an undercover Western reporter while Ceausescu was still in power.
Reggel 7-től este 7-ig kellett dolgozni. Őrülten nagy munkanormát adtak. Amikor a napi munkadagot nem dolgoztuk le, ott tartottak minket, és tovább kellett dolgozni, addig, amíg be nem fejeztük. Az én századomból 6 hónap alatt 13 ember halt meg. 2 felakasztotta magát, a többi üzemi baleset következtében halt meg.
Ceausescu also started to knock down Romanian villages and move the inhabitants to new towns. This would both clear more land for agriculture and tighten his stranglehold on the peasants. The story of how Lenuta and Marin Sărescu's house was demolished is depressingly typical. The method used was to dig a large hole and to bulldoze the house with all its belongings into it.
We took anything we could grab quickly.
Did you resist?
If we had, they'd have taken us to the militia station and beaten us. Some resisted, and they got beaten up, so people just shut up.
They were allocated a flat in a new block. It had no doors, windows, running water, or heating.
When I reached the stairs, my knees were shaking, coming from a beautiful house to these ruins. No door, no window, nothing. Debris everywhere, everything a disaster.
So in desperation, Lenuta and Marin bribed an official to let them move into a nearby flat. This too had no running water or heating, but it did have a small garden.
For us peasants, it was a catastrophe. They took away my house and land and gave me a flat for which I have to pay rent. I've got no money to pay the rent, no way to make a living.
Many people who lost their homes were traumatized. At the same time as thousands were losing their homes, the regime of shortages that Ceausescu was inflicting on his subjects was making him more and more unpopular. Food became very scarce. Ceausescu was exporting Romanian food to pay off the country's huge foreign debts. Pig's trotters were known as patriots, as they were the only parts of the pig which didn't leave the country. For Nicolae Melinescu, with a working wife and a newborn child, finding the time to shop was very difficult.
So there was a saying that if you don't have a grandfather or grandmother, you should buy one, because they came in very handy. They would do all the queuing for you. And my father would volunteer. He loved my son very much. So no sacrifice was too much for him. And he would queue 14 hours to get half a packet of butter for my son.
Paraskiva and Marian Neagu were typical of the thousands of peasants who moved to towns to get work. For them, the shortages were an even bigger problem because they didn't have a residence permit. This meant they weren't eligible for food coupons.
If somebody offered me meat, some lard or chicken's legs and throats, I never refused. Even colleagues at work gave me food because they knew I had 3 children and I had nothing to feed them.
Because they had no residence permit, they weren't eligible for a government flat either. They had to rent privately this leaking shack which had no bathroom or lavatory. For heating and cooking, they used an improvised electric stove. But during the 1980s, there were more and more power cuts.
We had electricity in the daytime, but at night they cut it off, which meant we couldn't cook. If we had wood for the fire, we could at least stay warm, but if not, we froze.
The increasing number of daytime cuts made the house even colder. Those with central heating did not fare much better, as the periods when it was on grew ever shorter, and even then the temperature was never above 12 Celsius. All this was a major source of dissatisfaction. Our student comedy group did a sketch on how the average Romanian started his day. But as so many of the words they wanted to use, like for instance, food, were banned by the censors, the sketch was silent.
A man wakes up in the morning, goes to have a shower, and tries to turn on the taps. Of course, there was one. No matter how hard you tried to turn it on, nothing would ever come out, because it was the hot water tap, and there was no hot water at that time. On the other hand, the cold water tap got larger and larger. I wanted to make a comparison between how big the tap was and how little water was coming out, because even cold water was rationed at the time.
Silvio was fortunate that the party didn't issue a list of forbidden gestures as well as forbidden words.
Finally, Romanians could laugh no longer. Revolution broke out. There was a series of sporadic, disorganized but deadly encounters in Bucharest and other cities. In the middle of this mayhem, Paraskiva's husband went missing. She and the children set out to look for him.
I had our younger daughter in my arms, and the older one was walking in front of me. If she'd been one step further away, she would have been hit by a bullet. But you couldn't see anybody. You looked around for snipers, but bullets came from the most unexpected directions.
But the revolution got a decisive boost when the army changed sides. The Ceausescus were captured. On Christmas Day, they were brought to trial.
He took his hat off and smoothed his hair down. I couldn't recognize him. He was looking around, frightened.
Paratrooper Ionel Boiru first took the Ceausescus to this room for a medical examination.
Unlike Nicolae Ceausescu, who smelled normally, like somebody who takes care of himself, she smelled embarrassingly bad, but she behaved normally.
During the trial, there was considerable concern that forces sympathetic to the old regime might try and rescue the Ceausescus.
I was in the courtroom and under orders to execute them if that happened, even at the risk of shooting other people.
The Ceausescus were accused of killing thousands of people during the revolution and in the years before.
Crimă prin înfometare, prin lipsă de căldură, prin lipsă de lumină. Dar cea mai odioasă crimă a fost crima de a încătușa spiritul românesc, sufletul acestui popor. E o minciună, nu recunosc că am făcut poporul, nu vă spun ca să vă gândiți bine că e o minciună în faci și arată acum cât de lipsă de patriotism și ce trădare s-a comis în țara.
This was a show trial. After 90 minutes, it ended with the Ceausescus being sentenced to death.
Everybody went out of the courtroom and I was left alone with them. A lieutenant colonel entered the room and ordered me to take them out separately and shoot them. But they said no. They wanted to die together. Then I asked the officers to grant them their last wish, to be shot together.
Le-am ordonat colegilor mei să ne deplasăm în jur de 6 pași.
I ordered my men to set the machine guns on automatic fire to make sure we wouldn't miss.
La foc automat, ca nu cumva să ratăm tragerea.
I fired 29 cartridges in 3 rounds. The first one hit Nicolae in the knees, and the second in his chest. And the third round hit Elena Ceausescu.
Următoarea rafală a fost asupra Elenei Ceausescu.
Nu mai trage nimeni.
Because the 2 paratroopers with him panicked and were slow to open fire, Boiru believes it was his shots which killed Nicolae and Elena.
Ridică-l să-l vedem. Ridică-l să-l vedem. Ridică-l, mai sus capul.
Eu zic că el și-a...
He got exactly what he deserved.
ceea ce trebuia să primească.
I still think that.
Rămân la această părere și acum.
The Ceausescu's death, like their life, was a spectacle. The men who had taken over needed to show that they were now in charge.
I saw the dead bodies on television, and I saw the same scene over and over again, and it was like we couldn't get enough of it, you know, to see that, to make sure that it was happening, that they were really dead.
Paraskiva's husband, Marianne, died in the revolution. This is what he said the last time he left home.
Even if he were to die, he still would have no regrets if his children were to have a better life, a happier life, a more comfortable life than ours, not to be tormented like we were.
Altogether, some 1,140 people were killed and over 3,000 injured during the revolution. One legacy of the Ceausescu years is the monster palace which, now completed, dominates Bucharest. Less quantifiable is the effect of the dictators on the minds and self-respect of Romanians who lived under the Ceausescu shadow for nearly 25 years. The end of communism across Eastern Europe was sudden, unexpected, and greeted with great enthusiasm. But what has replaced it has not always been universally welcomed. As Karl Marx, the founder of communism, once said, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they choose.
You can see all 3 parts of The Lost World of Communism on BBC iPlayer. Coming up now on BBC Two for veteran broadcaster and traveller Alan Wicker, an opportunity to reflect on his life and career starting in Venice and his transition from soldier to journalist.